the Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes?
Greetings. I am Admiral Swart, Commanding Officer of the USS Dauntless, and this is the briefing with the Admiral for Stardate negative 1297.1. I am the Admiral in question, and today we're going to be talking about the skill/effort dichotomy. But before we get onto that, let's talk about our regular housekeeping stuff. So first of all, we record these sessions every Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. South African Standard Time. Most Tuesdays. We try to do it every week if we can. If you are an active duty member of the Dauntless crew, you're welcome to join us live for these recording sessions in Discord in the Screening Room channel, in which case you can participate in the chat and you can ask me questions as we go. Although typically I'll only look at the questions once we get to the end because I've got a lot to get through and I can't allow myself to get distracted. If you're not an active duty member of the crew, you're welcome to join us on YouTube. We do our best to live stream these to YouTube simultaneously, so I can monitor the chat usually. Unclear if it's working right now. My dashboard is not giving me unambiguous signals right now, so may or may not be working. Even if we don't stream live to YouTube, we will upload it to YouTube after the fact. So if this time, middle of the day on a Tuesday, is not a convenient time for you, then you can watch it back there. We also post it to Facebook, at least for now. Facebook seems to be making some changes to how they handle large videos, so I'm not sure if we're going to be able to keep doing that because it seems to be broken. But at least for the time being, it will be posted on Facebook as well as YouTube. I see there is chat happening on YouTube. That means that it's working there. Fantastic. Good news. All right. But who am I and why am I here? Right, so I'm the commanding officer of a thing called the USS Dauntless, which is a future-focused advocacy and action group that has a special interest in Star Trek. So we are at our core a Star Trek fan club. But we aren't just the sort of Star Trek fans that sit around watching Star Trek and collecting collectibles, although we do those things too. We have an active interest in bringing about the optimistic future as envisioned in the Star Trek franchise, or as envisioned by Gene Roddenberry and depicted in the Star Trek franchise, in which most of the problems that we face today, things like crime, poverty, disease, war, have largely, if not entirely, been solved on Earth, if not in the rest of the galaxy. And we think that that sounds like a pretty cool world to live in. So we do whatever we can here and now to try and move things towards that idealistic ideal, that outcome, what that world could and should be. And we hope that through our efforts, we can make a contribution that will eventually lead our civilization to that point, perhaps not in our lifetime, but at some point in the future. And every step we can take towards that optimistic future, the better it is for everybody involved. We are a chapter of Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association Incorporated, which is the largest fan organization for Star Trek in the world. We have thousands of members in hundreds of chapters and dozens of countries around the world, and we are the one that is based in Cape Town, South Africa. But we're not limited only to Cape Town. Most of our operations take place online, which means that we can and do have members all over the place. Right, so today we're here to talk about the dichotomy of a skill versus effort. Now, by way of defining terms, skill is your ability to perform a task, right? And skill is relative. You can build a skill, you can get better at performing a task, which allows you to do it faster, more efficiently, more consistently, with superior outcomes. You can optimize your outcomes by building your skill over time. And effort is your willingness to put in the time and work to perform the task. Skill and effort are not mutually exclusive, but you can trade them off one against the other. For example, if you lack a particular skill, you can spend additional effort up front to perform the task. It will require extra effort from you if you lack the skill. But the more effort that you put in, the more you will develop that skill. So then your ability to do the task becomes more efficient. So then it requires less effort over time to perform the skill to the same level, which then frees up your mental bandwidth, as the kids call it, your cognitive load when performing the task, to either take on additional tasks and build additional skills, or to do that task better and better. Depending on what kind of task it is, it might be scope for you to overperform and do it even better than you did before. And that is what skill allows you to do. So you need effort, which is the willingness to put in the work, and you need skill, which is your actual ability to do the work. You can use effort to build skill, and you can use a skill to save you effort in the long run. But we're not here to talk about those two concepts in general. We've already done that. We've finished with that. What we're going to talk about is when stuff goes wrong, right? So when work is not done, when a task is not completed, typically that boils down to one of two different errors. It's a skill error or an effort error, and this is where we're going to be dwelling today. We're going to be talking about the negative side of this kind of thing, right? So there's a sharp distinction between these two common problems that we encounter, not only in our duties here on the Dauntless, although that is the context that we're here to address. This affects every aspect of life, right? So your day job, your personal relationships, everything. Anytime a task needs to be done, this is the thing that is relevant. So the difference between a skill issue and an effort issue, and the distinction matters because it determines how we respond, right? So when a task is undone or not done or isn't completed, how we respond to that non-completion of the task is determined by whether or not we're looking at an effort issue or a skill issue, and how we respond from a leadership point of view, how we respond from a team point of view, and how we move together as an organization and as an individual in response to that having taken place, and how to take steps to avoid or to mitigate it happening again in future. So the core message that we're going to be getting through today is that if you're not succeeding at something, you need to ask yourself whether it's because you lack the ability to do it, the skill, or because you're just not trying or not trying hard enough. So let's define skill issue and effort issue, right? We've already defined skills and effort. But a skill issue happens when somebody genuinely lacks the knowledge or the technique or the practice to perform a task effectively. They might be trying their best, but they're not getting it right. They're falling short because they haven't yet developed the competence at doing so. An effort issue is when the ability is present or it's within easy reach, right? So you either already have the skill, or it's the lack of skill isn't relevant to the task. In other words, you can do the task without having a lot of skill required, right? Just by putting in the work. But the individual is not applying themselves. They're not taking the time. They're not making the effort to do the work. They're not engaging, and they aren't putting in the effort. So that's an effort issue. Skill issue, can't do it. Effort issue, won't do it. And it's not a soft distinction. It's actually measurable and observable. And we've done a briefing about a related subject some time ago now, when we talked about weaponized incompetence as a tactic that some people will use to try and deflect work away from themselves, right? And that is when people try to confuse you into thinking that an effort issue is a skill issue. And we're going to talk about today how to tell the difference between the two and how to recognize how they're different. So let's start by doing that. So let's figure out how to identify what you're looking at. So when a task has been assigned and the work hasn't been done, we can interrogate that situation with the following questions. The first question is, has the person attempted the task repeatedly and failed despite visible effort? Right? So have you seen that they tried to do the thing, right? Have you observed that they made the effort, that they put in the work and didn't get it right? Okay. If so, that's a skill issue, unambiguously a skill issue. has the person avoided the task, right? Is there no sign that they've made any actual effort to put in the work? Have they ignored instructions? Have they made no progress whatsoever? Even if they didn't do it to completion, have they really made no visible progress towards completing the goal, towards completing the task? Even though they had the ability, they had the time, they had the skill, they had the tools, then it's likely an effort issue. Tools is an important side point. There is a third reason why something might fail, and that is if you don't have access to the resources that you need to complete the task. And that is not on you, right? It's not on you if you lack the resource to complete the task. If you need a specific tool to do a job and you don't have that tool, that's not necessarily on you. Unless you have the ability to acquire the tool, then it's on you. So you can split the resource or tool availability thing into, again, a skill issue. Do you have the skill to acquire or to obtain the tool, or are you not putting in the effort to do the thing? And if you don't have the resources to perform a task, let's say you need a particular piece of information in order to complete a form, and you don't have that available to you, and the person that you need to get the information from is being unresponsive, you need to throw that up the flagpole and make sure that your superiors know that you are unable to complete your task because you're waiting on somebody else, right? So that's communication, which is a skill thing, right? If you just sit there on your hands and don't let anybody know that you're waiting on somebody else, then that becomes an effort issue. So there you can divide your resources between effort and skill. It does complicate the matter somewhat, but we're not going to be throwing that into the works too often. Is the individual that you're assessing, the person who has completed or failed to complete the work, are they open to feedback and correction, right? Are they interested in actually learning from their mistakes, from their errors, from their failures, or are they not interested in listening? If they are willing to receive feedback, that signals effort. That means that they are trying, okay? But if there's a pattern of excuses, there's passive resistance, they just don't seem to want to do it, or silence, they're not being communicative, that signals lack of effort. That means we can take that to mean that they're not actually really trying. But why does this matter, right? Why does it matter, the difference between these two things? If the work simply isn't being done, then who cares why, right? Why is it important? When you misidentify an effort issue as a skill issue, right? So when something is an effort issue and you think, oh, okay, this is a skill issue, you waste your time and resources trying to train somebody who simply isn't applying themselves, okay? So you assume that somebody is lacking the skills because they're not doing the work and they're telling you, oh, I don't know how to do this. So you take time out of your day, you set aside your own tasks, and you spend your own time and resources trying to impart the necessary skills to the person. Because if you're a leader, if you're an officer, if you're in charge of a team or something like that, it is your responsibility to equip the people under your command with the skills that they need to do their work, right? That's on you if there genuinely is a skill issue. But if it's an effort issue, if they're not completing their tasks because they're simply not trying, that's on them, not on you. And it's not your responsibility to provide them with effort, because, I mean, you can't do that, right? That's not a thing that's possible to do. And by trying to compensate lack of effort with additional skills, that's not going to do it, right? So the more time you spend training somebody who doesn't need training, they're actually just lazy, the more time you're wasting of your own, and then less of your work is being done, right? So this is a whole mess, an increasingly expanding mess of misapplication of resources. The converse, when you misidentify a skill issue as an effort issue, so when somebody, you think that they're just being lazy, but actually they don't have the skills, right? They're trying, but they're not getting it right. You risk demoralizing somebody who's actually trying and really does need your support, right? So this is a situation where the person really does need your help. They really do need to be trained. They do need your time and resources in order to equip them with the skills they need to complete the task. And if you think that they're just being lazy when they're actually just need training, then that's another misattribution of resources, right? So knowing the difference between those two things, being able to identify which one it is, it protects your time, it preserves morale of your team, of your crew, of your unit, and it upholds the standards for everybody, because it allows everybody to do the work at the level that is expected of them. Perhaps not right away, but eventually. So let's look at some strategies for addressing each one of these things, right? So when you encounter a skill issues are the easy one. The first obvious thing to do is to offer training or mentorship. So training is the easy version. Somebody comes to you and say, "Oh, I can't complete this task because I don't know how to do it." Then taking them aside and showing them how to do it. That's easy. That's relatively quick. Doesn't require a lot of commitment or investment from you, just the time that it takes to show them how to do the thing. Mentorship is a more committed version of that, when you're making a commitment, formal or informal, to providing training to this individual on multiple occasions over time, right? So you're opting into becoming a mentor for this person. Now, we don't have a formal mentorship structure within the Dauntless, but a lot of organizations do. And that is something that we've toyed with over the years, is whether or not we should be instituting or implementing something like that. Incidentally, if you think that you might be interested in signing up for a mentorship program on the Dauntless, either as a mentor or a mentee, let me know. We can look into exploring that as an option if there's sufficient interest. But there are plenty of other organizations that I've been part of, where mentorship is part of the inherent structure, and it makes a lot of sense for those particular kinds of organizations. But you don't need a formal recognition for mentorship. You can do it on an informal, individual basis. If you see somebody who you think has potential and you would like to help them meet that potential, then you can take them on as a mentor. You don't have to ask their permission. You can just step up and say, "Hey, I can see you're struggling with this. Can I help you?" And you can develop that into a long-term relationship. Likewise, if you think that there's somebody on the crew who you can learn from, and you would like them to be a mentor, you can either ask them, "Please, will you mentor me?" Or you can just develop that relationship on an organic basis, that person becomes the person you go to first to ask questions about how to do your work. And the same thing again applies to just about any other aspect of life, even personal relationships. So mentorship is more of a commitment. Individual training is quicker and easier, but both of those are equally useful when it comes to addressing skill issues. Next strategy is setting achievable milestones or goals. Now, we did a briefing a few weeks ago on goal setting. When we were talking about it then, we were talking about it mostly from the context of mission readiness. So this is the general sort of self-improvement philosophy, doctrine that we follow here on the Dauntless. But part of that is also developing the specific skills that you need in order to do your work. And again, whether that's Dauntless work or professional work or building personal relationships or in your church or whatever other aspect of your life, skill development is part of your mission readiness. Right, and creating and designing and following goals, using goals as a tool to get you to the level of skill that you need, is invaluable. So, right, you see that you are down here, you want to get up there. You need to build yourself a ladder, and you need to create the rungs of that ladder. Those rungs are the goals. They need to be manageable so you can reach the next one without straining too hard, without it being dangerous, without falling all the way back down again. But there are enough rungs to get you to the top, right? So that's goal setting. Those are your achievable milestones that can be used to help you develop a skill. Or if you are training or mentoring somebody else, you can help them with their goal setting to help them attain the level of skill that they need. And then the next strategy is encouraging practice with feedback loops, right? So feedback is quite important, especially when you're talking about goal setting. And that is, you need to be able to measure when you've completed it, right? So how do you know that you've reached the level of skill in order to perform this task adequately? So building in some kind of a feedback loop so that you can measure, preferably objectively, how well you're doing at a task is quite important. And practicing obviously matters. The more you do a thing, the better you get at it, whether that's throwing a ball against the wall or completing the command status report, right? It's any task that can be done better, and practicing doing it helps you to do it better and better, more efficiently, more effectively over time. The more you practice and the more you can review feedback from your previous iterations of having done it, the more you can make adjustments to your approach and how you do it and do it better and better. So practice with feedback loops matters, and that helps you with your achievable milestones. And again, if you are training somebody or if you are mentoring somebody, then you can help provide that feedback. You yourself can be the feedback that somebody can derive, or at least the source of the feedback that somebody derives from practicing, if you're helping them in that way. Strategies for developing effort issues is a bit more complicated, right? So this is okay. Let me describe my approach for outlining these strategies. If you find that yourself have an effort problem, that you yourself are not feeling motivated to do the work, then that's entirely on you, right? And you're going to need to find your motivation within yourself. But as a leader, as a supervisor, as a team leader, commanding officer, mentor, trainer, that is the audience that I'm talking to now when it comes to effort issues, right? So when you're dealing with somebody that you know has effort issues, they're failing to put in the effort needed to complete the task. Not that they lack the skill, but they lack the effort. Here's some strategies that you can use to address that. And again, we've gone through a lot of these in the previous briefing that we did on weaponized incompetence. But for the purposes of today's discussion, the first one you can do is you can set clear expectations and consequences, right? So the work needs to be done by clarifying exactly what work needs to be done and how it needs to be done, including all relevant details, like if it needs to be done in a specific time or a specific place or with a specific set of tools. All of those things need to be clarified and outlined so that there is no ambiguity for the person that needs to do the work, right? So it becomes very, very clear that this is how we're expecting it to be done. So doing it your own way is not necessarily the way that we do it, right? It has to be done to meet these specific criteria. And those criteria need to be objective and verifiable, right? So when you are outlining those expectations and consequences, you need to be able to monitor and see when those criteria have been met, and you need to be able to unambiguously and with transparency to anybody who is a relevant stakeholder see whether or not it has in fact been met. And also that, so here's the part that's going to be difficult, and that is to reinforce the principle that making the effort is a moral obligation, right? So it's on you as a person, as an officer, as a person who is trying to do good in the world. It is your moral and personal responsibility to do the work. If you've committed to doing a job, you are expected to do it, and everybody is expecting it of you, right? So in order to do a good person, you have to do what you can to meet your commitments. The bottom line for all of these strategies is that support only works when the individual is putting in the effort, right? If they're not trying, then no amount of coaching is going to help. Yeah, okay. So which brings us to the next thing, which is that accountability is the strategy, right? So when dealing with effort issues, accountability is what's required. Effort is always required, always, right? So that is the policy. And it's not just a dauntless policy. That's a policy in any organization where stuff needs to get done, even informal organizations. And if you're committing to doing a piece of work, you're expecting to do that. Even in your household, right? If you're committing to do a particular work, mowing the lawn or whatever it is, and you've committed to doing it, it's your moral responsibility to either do the work or to let the people know, the other stakeholders, other members of your household or whoever it is, know that you can't do it and why, right? It is your moral responsibility to follow through on the commitments that you've made. Now, here in the Dauntless, we use performance criteria that are as clear and measurable and transparent as possible to track people's contribution that they've made. When I say transparent, I don't mean that they're public, they're open to everybody. They are transparent to the relevant stakeholders. So we have our policy, of course, which is praise in public, critique in private, right? So we will only make milestones visible to everybody when they are positive. But if we see that people are failing to meet their requirements, we will try to keep that private and visible only to the people who need to see that information, right? Which is, it might be a large group of people, might be a small group of people, but only people who need that information, need to know basis. If you meet the criteria, you advance, right? What does advancement means? On the Dauntless, that could mean rank promotions, awards, commendations, various other things. It could just be people giving you a high five and thinking positively of you by promoting and developing your personal reputation. That is how you advance, right? By meeting the requirements, and everybody can see that you're doing so. If you don't meet the requirements, then your reasons matter, right? It's important why you haven't met the obligations. And that's why we need to do the test. Is it a skill issue? Is it that you simply weren't able to do it? Or is it an effort issue that you kind of didn't want to do it, right? Skill issue, effort issue, reasons matter. The person who is struggling, but who is trying, if they're making the effort, they will always have our support, right? Everybody has virtually infinite patience for people who are putting in the work but are struggling to do it. Everybody will feel sorry for you if you really can't do it right, and they'll do what they can. They want you to succeed, right? They want to help you find your success. But the person who isn't trying will not garner any sympathy, right? People don't feel sorry for somebody who's just not putting in the effort. So it's not cruelty, right? Although it might seem a little bit harsh. It's not cruelty, it's clarity, right? It's about understanding where we are spending our resources, where we are devoting our time and effort and emotional energy, and who needs it and who doesn't, right? So that's what that's about. And that's why accountability is the thing, right? If you're accountable for your actions, then everybody around you, all the relevant stakeholders, all the people who are involved in your career, again, dauntless or not dauntless, then they know how to evaluate the situation and how to spend the resources. So that's why we have consequences, right? That's why we have escalations here on the Dauntless. And it's something that we try to avoid is negative outcomes if we can possibly avoid it. But some situations it is unavoidable. So when somebody's not meeting expectations, consistently not meeting expectations, and it's clear that this is because of an effort issue, right? It's not because somebody is trying and failing, it's because they're not trying. The consequences are typically disqualification from advancement, right? It means you won't be considered for promotions, it won't be considered for assignment to new positions, won't be put forward for awards, you won't receive commendations, that kind of thing, right? If you're failing and it looks like you're not even trying, in fact, if it's clear that you're not trying, then you kind of disqualify yourself from all of those things. And what it means is that people will notice, people will think less of you, your reputation will take damage, and they won't want you to see you in positions of leadership, right? They won't want to see you getting advancement opportunities. They won't want to see you getting awards because they think, well, this person's not putting in the work, so why should they be recognized in this way? And that's why we try to be as accountable and as transparent as possible, so that it is obvious when people are getting accolades, when people are getting awards, when they're getting promotions, that they are deserving of those advancements, right? It's clear to everybody what they've done to earn those achievements. And every individual has a responsibility to meet the effort threshold, right? We're all held to the same standards, every single one of us. But nobody else can do that for you, right? Nobody else can put in the work for you. We all have the same standard that we're expected to meet, and we each have to meet it on our own. And this isn't, again, unique to Starfleet or to the Dauntless. Although we might have a particular set of structures here on the Dauntless where we manage or optimize those outcomes, the same principles apply in every other aspect of your life. Personal life, your community, your church, your day job, personal relationships, your family, all of these things apply across the board in every aspect of your life, right? So you're building your personal reputation in the minds of other people, and that reputation will be bolstered by putting in the work. Even if you lack the skill, simply putting in the effort, people will think more positively of you, and it will be damaged if they can see that you're not putting in the effort, which means they will trust you less and they'll think less of you. People have more patience for somebody who's trying and failing than for somebody who won't even try, because it's effort that earns respect. Lack of effort earns consequences. And you are the only person who's responsible for your effort. You're always the only person who can put in the effort. No one else can do that for you. Someone else can help you build your skills. Someone else can help you learn how to do things, can provide you with resources. But without the effort, and the effort can only come from you, then it's not going to get done. So the next time you catch yourself or someone else around you saying, I can't, ask the real question. Is it that you can't, or is it that you won't? Because the distinction makes all the difference. Okay, that's what I needed to say. Let's see if we have any questions or comments. Okay, we have from Colonel Bear. So the phrase "can't stop, won't stop" is both a skill issue and an effort issue. Yes, I would say that that is both of those. Yes, can't stop, won't stop. Yes. We have from Petty Officer Davis. I have a coworker who's just one step below me on the copywriter rung. We have a very small copy department, and she interned here for a year, and without mentorship, she's developed really bad habits in terms of her writing and operational processes. Yeah, that sounds rough. She's now in a spot where she's giving hamster wheel effort that takes her nowhere and tires her out, but she won't accept advice from me because her mentor, who lives in the States and only speaks to her once every week or so, has seniority, and she thinks she can only take advice from him. She won't accept that she has both a skill and effort issue, and she's stressing me out trying to help her. Yeah, that sounds like a rough situation. And what it sounds like is that it started out perhaps as a skill issue, so somebody who needed training, who was inexperienced and needed to be provided with the necessary skills to do the work. But over time has resulted, it's kind of shifted into an effort issue, where this co-worker is no longer prepared to put in the work needed to increase the skills, and that's an effort issue. So even though she's still doing some work, she's not obtaining the results that she should be obtaining because she's not prepared to put in the effort. Complicated, of course, by office politics and interpersonal dynamics and that kind of thing, which makes things even worse. And yeah, damn, these kinds of relationships are complicated. But yeah, that sounds exhausting, and I feel for you having to deal with that. And that's an important point to mention, is that when you're faced with somebody who is displaying consistent effort issues, it is exhausting for everybody else, right? Because not only do they have to then step up and fill in and do the work for that person or compensate for the fact that they're not doing the work, but just dealing with that emotional situation of having to put up with somebody who's clearly not putting in the work, that in itself is exhausting, right? Unless you are that person's direct superior, you don't have the authority to assert any consequences against that person necessarily, other than just taking them aside and saying, listen, Oak, sort yourself out. But even that, if there's no teeth of authority behind it, there's only so much you can do. One would hope that leadership structures within an organization would be able to step in and assist with that kind of a situation, but that doesn't always work, right? Because that in itself might be too difficult to deal with, depending on the size and structure and nature of the organization. Those feedback mechanisms simply might not exist yet. Hopefully they would be developed in future. Yeah, that's difficult. I don't know what more to tell you about that. That's terrible. But my yeoman has made a few more comments and questions. So let's look through those. How can we be sure whether something is a skill issue or an effort issue, right? Fair enough. Okay, so you're looking at a situation and perhaps you don't have complete knowledge of what's going on, especially in organizations like the Dauntless, where we don't actually spend a lot of time in each other's physical presence, right? We're communicating with each other mostly online, mostly through text. So it's not like a physical workplace where I can look over there and see whether or not that guy is doing his job. We kind of have to take people's word for it when they report back to us in writing or in voice. So how can we be sure, right? How can we be confident whether it's happening or not? And the fact is, you can't always know right away, right? You kind of have to take people's word for things. When somebody gives you an excuse, a reason for why they haven't completed their work, you kind of have to believe them. But what you can do is, over time, you can look for behavioral patterns. And if you can see that somebody consistently lacks effort in different aspects of their job, different aspects of their life, you can start to infer that perhaps the stories that you're getting are excuses and not real explanations. Implementing any kind of measurable feedback mechanisms would be great too, so you can apply objective feedback to these kinds of situations. But when you consistently see that somebody is repeatedly attempting to do something and not getting it right, but they're avoiding it, or versus avoidance, right? So somebody's trying something and they're not getting it right, where they're just avoiding the thing. Those are two different scenarios. whether they're engaging or whether they're keeping to themselves until the last minute and then they're saying, oh wait, no, this didn't happen. Are they making progress? Does it look like they're actually going somewhere, or are they just not going anywhere at all? Stagnation. uh, Based on that information, you can start to draw inferences about a person. And maybe you'll never know for sure whether or not it really is a skill issue or an effort issue, but you can start to draw your own conclusions and act accordingly. Next question. Isn't lack of effort sometimes caused by burnout or lack of motivation? Yes, sure. That can happen. Yeah. But when that happens, it's that individual's responsibility to do something about it, right? It's nobody else's job to motivate you. Ideally, in a good organization, the leadership can inject some elements of motivation into the leadership structure, and hopefully can you as an individual, as a worker, can use the structures that are available to you to motivate you to put in your effort. But ultimately it's on you to do that, right? Nobody can do the effort for you. That's the part you have to provide for yourself. Individual who is not meeting expectations, they're the one who has to put in the effort. No one else can. Next question. Shouldn't we be compassionate towards people who aren't trying because they're struggling in other areas of life? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Somebody's having a hard time. They're, got troubles at home. They've got troubles at work. Sure. We can definitely be compassionate about that. But compassion and accountability are not mutually exclusive, right? We can hold somebody accountable for their choices or their inaction while still feeling sorry for them, while still being compassionate towards them. You can be kind to somebody without compromising the standards that need to be met. The key is expecting honesty and effort, not perfection. So if you can see that they've just had a baby and they're not sleeping more than 3 hours a night and they can't put in any more effort than they're currently doing, they're doing what they can and they're being clear and open and transparent about what they're going through so that everybody around them can modulate their expectations, then compassion is fine, right? But if somebody is just disappearing down a hole and not letting anybody know what's going on and just their work doesn't get done, we can still feel sorry for whatever they might be going through. We can hope that they're going to get better, but we still need to hold them to that standard, right? We still need to be held accountable because the work still needs to be done. What if someone truly believes that they're trying, but their effort isn't visible or effective? That's a tricky one. Okay, so effort needs to manifest in observable ways in order for us to observe it, right? From a scientific point of view, that's kind of unavoidable. And if somebody thinks that they're trying, but they're not communicating, they're not being open, they're not being transparent, they're not engaging, and they're not producing anything that's measurable, then the effort is indistinguishable from apathy, right? From lack of effort, from absence of effort. So if you're dealing with somebody who claims that they are trying really hard, but they're not achieving any results, the response there is to, without being accusatory, ask them to start producing the evidence of the work, of the effort that they've made, right? You don't have to say, I don't believe you, you're just being lazy, prove it. But you can do it in a way that says something like, wow, that sounds really rough that you're having such a hard time. Let's see the work that you've attempted to do, and then we can address what's going on, right? That helps you to develop clarity as somebody in a leadership position, and it requires them to at least produce something and put in some effort, even if it's not enough. And then based on the information you derive from there, you can then take further steps. All right. There are a lot of questions here, so I'm just going to pick a couple more. The next one is, how do we structure advancement criteria so they reflect effort as well as outcome? And this is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about here in the Dauntless. So our advancement criteria relate to rank promotions, to appointment to duty stations, and to things like awards and commendations. And we always want to make sure that it's effort that's being rewarded, not necessarily outcomes. The only requirement I can think of that has there's two requirements I can think of that have outcomes-based criteria, and that is the the uniform certification. So when you put together your new uniform, any new uniform, if it's one of the uniforms that we recognize here in the Dauntless, you are required to submit an image of that uniform, of yourself wearing the uniform, to the quartermaster for certification so that it can be logged as being official. When you're wearing that uniform, you're good to go. And it needs to meet an objective standard, right? The colors need to be in the right place, the structure needs to be right, the comm badge needs to be right. Those standards are objective, and it's outcomes based. It doesn't matter how hard you worked, whether you stitched every stitch on that thing yourself or whether you bought the whole thing online. It doesn't matter, as long as the result is a uniform that passes inspection. That's all that matters. The other one is the physical fitness test. We did a briefing about this a few weeks ago. There is a minimum requirement. You need to be able to do however many push-ups. You need to do a 5K run in minimum amount of time, and you need to do however many crunches, I think it was. And there's a minimum standard, right? If you can't meet the standard, you don't pass the test. If you do meet the standard, you pass the test. Easy. As much as possible, all of the other advancement opportunities that we put together, we try to reward effort, right? So the effort in terms of showing up. A good example of this is our blood donation missions, our priority 1 missions. Now, these are missions that are mandatory for everybody to attend. All active duty crew members are required to attend the priority 1 missions. And notice the wording there, mandatory to attend. So even though the point of the mission is to donate blood, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to donate as much blood as we can to save people's lives. We don't make donating blood mandatory, right? It's encouraged, recommended, all that, but it's attendance that's mandatory. Making the effort to physically show up, that's what we require, right? It's putting in the effort that is what counts towards your promotion criteria. As much as possible, as opposed to the outcomes that you obtain. So we try to recognize whenever possible and as much as possible, making the effort over the actual results at the end of the day, with the assumption being that the more effort you put in consistently over time, the better your outcomes will become, right? If you're somebody who doesn't donate blood, for example, because you're nervous of needles or because you're queasy about blood, that kind of thing, the more times you attend physically the blood donation missions and you're surrounded by people donating blood and you see that these needles are happening and blood is pumping and it's not that big a deal, and you can see that nobody's passing out, nobody's having trouble, everybody's just fine with it, the more likely each time you go, you will be to donate your blood yourself. And I've observed this happening in real time with our blood donation missions in the past, right? Somebody will come to the first one, feel really squeamish and uncomfortable. Second one, they feel slightly less uncomfortable, slightly less squeamish. By the 4th or 5th one, they're giving blood alongside everybody else, right? This is not an unusual thing to happen. So we recognize the effort and not the outcome, because the assumption being that the outcomes will happen eventually as long as you're putting in the effort now. All right, I'm going to skip more of these questions. All right, let's go for this one. This is probably the most important question. Isn't it harsh to expect effort in every situation? Maybe it is. But in a volunteer-based organization like ours, right, although we have a distinction of 2 different types of membership, we've got standard positions and we've got duty stations. Duty stations are explicit volunteer positions. Even standard positions, in order to be a part of this group, in order to be part of this community, a certain amount of effort is required from you in order to retain the group, right? In order for the group to exist, we need every member of the group to put in a minimum amount of effort. And whether that's simply attending priority 1 missions or attending at least 50% of priority 2 missions or making contributions on Discord, that kind of thing, right? A minimum amount of effort is required from everybody in order to make the whole thing work. And without it, then what's the point? Right, so we do expect a minimum level of effort from everybody as an entry-level requirement. And if someone can't meet that minimum level of effort, then perhaps this isn't the place for them, right? Perhaps the Dauntless is not the right chapter for them. Perhaps being an active duty member of Starfleet is not the right choice for them, and maybe they need to rethink their priorities, and that's fine. It's not for everybody, right? Not everybody is a Starfleet officer. Not everybody gets to be an admiral. That's kind of the point, right? It's an exclusive club for people who are prepared to take on the responsibility of making this world a better place in this specific way. And if doing that is not something that you can do, then that's okay. There's something else you can do, and maybe it's not this. So stepping back as a response to that is probably a rational choice. So yes, we do hold everybody to a standard because it's not for everybody, right? We're not holding random people on the streets to the same standard that we meet here on the Dauntless, but everyone on the Dauntless, if you've chosen to be here, you are expected to meet our minimum level of commitment. All right, any more questions on YouTube? No. In the chat? No. Lively chat, but nothing's directed at me. That's good. Okay, that means that we can probably call it there. All right, so I'm going to leave you with this thought, which is to say, no one can do the work for you, and no excuse can substitute for showing up. If you're willing to try, you'll find support. But if you're waiting to feel ready before you act, you'll be waiting forever. Progress doesn't come from talent alone. It comes from movement, from effort, from choosing to step up, even when it's uncomfortable. Show up, put in the work, and earn the right to grow. Thank you. That is all for today. You are dismissed. Swart out.